So this is my current Cataclysmic Fault deck list. We've got Xerix for reasons that will... It should be obvious. We want to make lots of creatures. We're playing things that pay us off for having creatures. Mostly First Wish and Lady Locke. And also, this helps us hit critical mass of just stuff in play, which plays into our overall game plan with Fault. You don't need Xerix for this, but we don't have any synergy with the other generals. And Xerix, I think, is the best in a vacuum. Only 2 Ray. I'm not sure this is right. It's possible that you just want to play 3 of this and 3 Faults, that you get the combo on curve as consistently as possible. But I think you only ever really want to draw 1 Ray, and you want to draw it only when you have a Fault and the ability to play Fault. Although it does increase the threshold at which you can play Fault. Like, you know, playing a Fault and getting nothing and playing Fault and getting a 5/2/2s are very different. Kitty? Your battery's dying.
Oh, cheers. I didn't realise I wasn't plugged in.
Would stuff like Zix on the deck be overkill? Probably.
Oh, wow. I haven't plugged it in since we went to draft last week.
This, yeah, that seems like an error. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, actually. I think there's probably other decks you can make with Lady Locke that might suit that better. Like, I don't know what I'd cut for Zix. I already play a lot of cheap stuff. It is good with Portal Guardian, though. Thinking about it. But I don't know if that's worth it. But there might be a Swarm deck with Lady Locke. I remember people used to do that in the past. Maybe it's redundant with Wanderer now. Wanderer is kind of a permanent better one. But opinion on Falcius, I really like Falcius as a 4-drop. I think it's still good, but it feels like a much fairer card now. Like, I'm only playing 2, and that was unthinkable before. But now I feel like that's a legit decision. Like, you could play 0, you can play 3, anything in between. I think Sarge lists will play the maximum possible, because Falcius in Sarge is basically Entropic Decay. That gives you a 3/3. And of course it's really good with all the various artifacts. But it's no longer the, like, Falcius lol I win play that it was before, but it's still good. Like, it feels more like a card that they should have made now. Like, when Falcius was printed the first time, I think it was some effort to make Vitruvian good. This was before even Blood of Air existed, so it was like, well, this faction just sucks right now. How can we give them some kind of push to help them fight for board without taking away from their kind of theme of not having ranged removal? I think 3 Ray is mandatory for a Fault deck. The Fault decks I played with only 2 weren't able to play it on curve very often. I think you may be right. I don't know what the cut is, but I'll go through the list and then we can think of ideas. It's probably a Sirocco, actually, but we'll come to that. So 2 Ray, we'll probably go to 3. I think that's... If you're finding the same thing as me, then I think that's good evidence. 3 First Wish. This card is really good. Good for early Golem tempo plays. Good for trading. Good for playing around Plasma Storm. On, you know, whatever 3-power minion. And helps us dig for things. We've got the Golem package to support Dream Shaper. So we have lots of 2-drops so that we can play things reliably in the late game alongside Fault. Buff up Portal Guardian and get tempo and value. You know, Vitruvian don't have a whole ton of ability to deal with stuff that's far away outside of Blood of Air, so it's helpful to have a board lead. And that plays into Vet's natural strength of being aggressive and pushy. Fault. yeah, we don't need faults. Those are terrible, right? Looking at the list, I don't think the nerf hit Sand Swallow that much. No, I thought as much. Like, it being a 3/3 is basically irrelevant. Love that deck name. Yes, I'm glad someone likes it. I was proud of that one. Moving on, we have Obelisks. I've got an Ethereal Obelisk and Fireblaze Obelisk. I'm not playing any of the 4 toughness ones, but maybe I should be. I think you could build this deck as Obelisk Vet with Fault, or you can build this deck as like Turbo Fault with Golems, is kind of how I've gone for it. And playing Golems also lets me play Sirocco, which is another kind of backup Lady Locke play that also goes well with Portal Guardian. But the Sirocco's been a bit I can go down to 1 and play a Ray instead. 3 Locke, this was the whole point. So I made these before Khanuum-Ka came out. It was my spoiler card, so I wanted to build some deck that might be, you know, here's how I would play Khanuum-Ka post-rotation. what can I play instead that does a similar sort of thing? Lady Locke makes all your dervishes into 3/3s. It's kind of the same. And it turned out actually it was just awesome. And now they buffed it, so I'm very happy. This card is gross. You can play a Fault, and then, like, the ideal play is Fault Ray into Lady Locke, and then, like, 2 Golems. And you just have, you know, like 8 provoke units in play out of nowhere, and your opponent can't do anything, especially if they're not playing Plasma Storms. So that's pretty nice. Portal Guardian, a newly buffed edition. This card is very powerful, very scary. 2 Falkius, as I mentioned earlier. These are the only 4-drops in the deck. There's nothing really much that grabs me, but there probably are things you could put in here. 3 Blood of Air, 3 Sandswirl, standard. 2 Sirocco. It's just occurred to me these could actually be Crons as well, if you wanted to play the Obelisk version. Sirocco is great because with Lady Locke, you can put an alarming amount of provokes into play, and then none of them die to a general hit at that point. They'll be X3s or Plasma Storm. So it makes for a very powerful swing turn, but in practice it's also a little bit awkward. So I think I can go down to 1 of these to put the Ray back in, and then we have 3 Faults, so we can get them as quickly as possible. Having extra Faults can be awkward, but they are good at, like, sometimes people will dispel your sand tiles or turn them into creep or play their own Cataclysmic Fault, and you can counter with yours, like your second copy. So it's not completely useless drawing extra ones. Yeah, we'll get rid of this. Put a Ray in. This deck can have issues with card flow. Your only real draw is Dreamshaper. I had Spelljammers in here before, but I cut them to make space for First Wishes. Yeah, Sandswirl is still really good. It being an X3 is not... If they made it 2 toughness, that would make a much bigger difference. Would possibly even be a fairer nerf. But the difference between 3/3 and 3/4 is not that large. Especially in the mid to late game when people will have already used their Blood Tier Alchemists. But it does make a difference against River and Cassava.